In this video, I'll be going over Barbarian's perks and skills, as well as how to play a Barbarian and a general overall guide. Starting with your perks and skills, I would first put on axe specialization. This is very strong with something like a horseman axe that swings quickly, because even though it doesn't do significant damage, it will add 5 weapon damage to that. So right now I have a gray horseman axe that does 23 damage, and it's going to be a 28 damage weapon just from having axe specialization on. After that, I would have savage, specifically if you're not running with a team, if you're doing solos, because you're going to want your movement speed a lot. If you are playing with a team, you probably want to have a chest piece on, and then replace savage with something like executioner that increases your headshot damage. You can even replace this with executioner as it is if you're really good at hitting headshots, but I feel that savage is really consistent, and not having a chest piece isn't much of a problem when you're running solos, because much of the time you're just going to want to get towards enemies and run them down as quickly as possible. Robust is my third choice here. Increase your HP by 10%. That's going to give you massive HP. I have 146 with, I think the only gear that I have is the riveted gloves that gives me a couple more HP points. And then finally, Iron Will. This is going to increase your magic resistance by 100. So you can see right here, with that, my base magic resistance is 33% with no gear. If I take that off, it goes down to 15%. This is going to increase your survivability significantly against warlocks and wizards. Good substitutions if you want to use a felling axe. Two-hander is also a very good substitution for maybe savage or even Iron Will. If you just want more damage, you can swap out Iron Will for executioner or two-hander, which might be the play if you're playing with a team that has healers. Crush can be very nice for looting quickly. I would say that's more of a personal preference one. It's good for staggering people with shields as well. The rest of the perks, I don't think that they're amazing. Potion Chugger is in the running. It can be useful in solos because you're going to need a lot of potions since you don't have any way to sustain yourself. When it comes to skills, I don't think anything really compares to Rage and Achilles Strike. Rage, you need the movement speed a lot. Even though it reduces your defense, you get the max health bonus. So 15 strength, you're going to have 30 extra health for 8 seconds, as well as that movement speed buff, and this will allow you to run most players down. Achilles Strike is going to be your second, probably best option. It's going to slow people down for 2 seconds, and also make them take damage every time that they take a step. On top of this, it's going to do a base extra 10 physical damage, which all of that is going to get your physical power bonus. As a barbarian, you're probably going to have a lot of physical power bonus, and this is going to multiply the damage that you do. So 26 means that the damage you do is going to have a 1.26 times multiplier with your axes, thrown axes, anything considered physical. If you're with a team, then Warcry could have its situations where it's useful. Say you have a bard and other movement speed buffers, then maybe replace Rage with something like Warcry, because you'll be able to catch enemies regardless of having that. Otherwise, it's going to be very difficult to run down enemies without Rage. Reckless Attack, it's a single attack, and if you have a felling axe or maybe even a bardiche, you could potentially one-shot a fighter or someone with this. it's very situational, whereas Achilles Strike is going to be good in pretty much every situation. Blood Exchange, I don't think is really worth swapping with anything else. Savage Roar, if you struggle with PvE, then you can use Savage Roar. It can be kind of useful, but in general, you'll be limiting yourself at higher levels if you're going to use Savage Roar as opposed to something like Achilles Strike. When it comes to weapons, the Horseman Axe is my personal favorite just because it gains all of those perk bonuses. Felling Axe would probably be the second best for me, but Felling Axe is going to be your most DPS, but Felling Axe you have to be very close to the enemy to hit, and you also get punished very hard if you miss any of your swings. The War Mauls, Vihander, and Bardiche are all decent for cleaving through multiple enemies at once, like say you're fighting a whole team that's clustered together, but they also have a lot of environments they're not good in. None of them are good in enclosed spaces, and hitting an environmental object is going to put you in a severe disadvantage. They're also fairly easily blocked, and really range is the most that they have on top of cleaving groups. In general, it's going to be difficult to outdo your potential in a 1v1 type situation, or when you're only focusing one enemy with a War Mauler's Vihander or Double Axe. Now that the Viking sword got buffed, it's another very reasonable option, just because you have the least movement speed debuff when you have it on. It's going to only be movement speed minus 20. It's not quite the DPS of a Horseman or Felling Axe, but it does have slightly more range as well. So most of the time you're going to two-hit a lot of the squishier people when you have a Viking sword. If you're not built, sometimes one-hit them. The downside to the Viking sword is that you'll tap ceilings and stuff in enclosed spaces, and it's a pretty easy to block attack. So someone with a shield can very easily block your overhead swing, much more easily than something like a Horseman Axe. I would always bring Francisca axes. You can apply Achilles Strike to these and initiate a battle with them. It's a little risky because you won't have your Achilles Strike if you miss on an enemy, but it can help when you run them down, and it can help you poke, which this is basically your only option to poke other than if you find lanterns or explosive bottles while you're running around. Potions are a must-have if you're by yourself, so buying the potions from the alchemist, he'll restock these junk quality potions occasionally for 6 gold each, and restocking those can increase your survivability drastically in goblin caves. Most of the time you're going to need to trade a hit or two when you get in PvP confrontations, so even if you're playing really well, you will probably need to heal at some point. So that, and bandages if you have the money for it. Bring surgical kits as well. A surgical kit or a campfire is also very amazing for sustaining you, because none of your abilities are going to sustain you very well as a barbarian. I'm not going to get into the build too much right now. In general, strength, weapon damage, those are going to be your priorities aside from all attributes, and then just having the movement speed to run people down. Also remember this physical power bonus. That's going to be a multiplier on top of whatever your weapon is going to do by default, and on top of whatever axe specialization and the other skills adds. Certain confrontations are great for Achilles Strike and Francisca axes. For example, if someone's running away from you, you can Achilles Strike and Francisca axe. Or if you have no other way of getting to the player, you can still poke at them with the Francisca axe. Also, if you're going to have a drawn out fight versus a barb or a fighter, you might want to just throw Francisca axes from a range. That way when you finally clash, you'll have the upper hand on them. If it's someone that's weak or you are ambushing them, I would recommend to save your Achilles strike just for your melee weapon though. This way you'll ensure that you hit Achilles strike and increase your success rate a lot. Barbarians are able to clear PvE enemies very quickly, so once you learn the spawns and solos, you can clear very quickly over to another spawn and potentially catch an enemy off guard. This type of spawn rushing technique can give you space in the beginning of the match, as well as ensuring that you'll have a portal to get out around the end. You'll also see that when I break into this person's spawn, I swap to my horseman axe, and they're actually ready for me. Load up Achilles strike, and then jump before my first swing. This way I don't lose the movement speed in the air, because if you're already mid-air, you'll retain your momentum while you swing. On top of that, it makes it very difficult for someone to hit a headshot, and much more likely for them to hit one of your limbs. Jumping like this before swinging is a great way to counter people who have really long weapons like a longsword or a halberd or spear. When running down enemies, you generally want to have your weapon away and queue up Achilles strike. Again, when someone has a long range weapon and you have a short range weapon, as a barbarian, jumping in order to get the first strike can be really important in changing the tide of a battle. If you get poked one single time before you're able to close the gap, then it will probably be the difference between life and death. I could have also started that confrontation with francisca axes, but it was in a very awkward spot for the battle axes that are swinging behind me, because I don't have much space to back up or work with when I'm changing weapons. If you're a solo barbarian, I would definitely recommend to also learn the positions of all the different heal shrines. That way, after getting into a confrontation, you can move over to whatever heal shrine is closest to you. If it's RNG whether it's there, you can check, or there are certain ones that are always health shrines like this one, and that can save you from having to waste a lot of resources or time to heal up, and it will definitely save you if you've already run out of healing items. As a barbarian, keep in mind that your advantage is close range and very quick DPS and killing. Most squishy enemies, as long as you can close the gap and consistently hit your shots on them, they will die first. If you're ever fighting a really fast enemy like a wizard, just remember, put away your weapon and punch the wizard. Lower health and defense enemies like wizards will have a lot of movement speed on you as long as they know how to use their abilities and haste. Generally, you want to queue up your Achilles strike and use your movement speed buff with your weapon away, and then you'll be fast enough to catch up to them. You'll still kill enemies like wizards with about 3 punches to the head, or even less if you hit Achilles strike and they try to run away from you. But the exception to this is if you're chasing an enemy like a rogue or a fast enemy that does have melee potential, then you want to swap to your weapon as soon as you see them taking theirs out. In a fist fight as a full health barbarian, you're almost guaranteed to win, especially if you have Achilles strike up. But if you're chasing an enemy like a rogue that has their weapons out the whole time, you really want to put your weapon away and chase them with your fists until you break enough distance to where you get in melee range. And then if they start to turn on you, you want to swing on them. But swap back to your weapon once you get close if they also have weapons, because smarter players will just turn around and attack you until you're dead. And you changing weapons is basically a free couple of hits for someone. If you're playing with a team as a barbarian, I would say the fundamentals still apply for everything that I've said in this video. The main difference is that you probably will have to wait a little longer to find good openings, and you'll have to worry about running in and the enemies isolating you from your teammates. I should also mention, if you have something like a ranger shooting arrows at you from a distance, try to reposition and come back into the area or come into the fight when you're closer to them. Once you do find an opening, just try to strafe as you're gaining progress on them while they shoot at you. Strafing and ducking and looking down can make it very hard for archers to hit you. So combining all of those things as you approach a ranger can allow you to get close enough to burst them down and kill them. In general, try to stay in close quarters, closed off areas, and play only your advantages. Those are my best tips right now from playing a decent amount of Barbarian, but if I think of anything else, then I'll pin it in the comments. So anyways, that's it for this video.